Welcome to the Sam and Joe VA Show, where we teach women just like you how to create your very own in-demand virtual assistant business.
We're your hosts, Sam and Joe, and get ready to have the control, flexibility, and freedom you've always dreamed of.
Welcome to episode 46, Firing Clients.
Firing clients. Firing clients is going to be one of the toughest conversations or discussions that you ever have with anyone in your virtual assistant business. But they're really important decisions that you are going to have to make, and they are really important discussions that you have to have. If you ignore or leave it too long, kind of those toxic, festering work relationships, it's not going to end well at all.
And I think having a realization when you're in business that you actually get to decide now who you work with and who you don't. And
Yeah.
this is a really big mind shift for everyone in business, that you actually have this control, because it's not natural to say no to people or fire clients, because we're so used to being employees. Well, you don't fire your boss, like, yes, you resign and leave, but I think this is it feels really different, because I think too that the client is relying on you to do work and they're paying you, and you want the money to be coming in. You don't want to lose the revenue from that client. But I think it's never worth it. It's not worth the angst, the hurt, the crying, the pain, the suffering that you can endure having a client that is just toxic and not right for you.
Yeah, it doesn't just feel different, I think, finding a client. It feels wrong on so many different levels, especially when you haven't had to do it before. You've worked really, really hard to find that client and to onboard that client and to get to know that client and the client's business. And you've probably invested time, you've invested energy. You may have a good relationship still with this client. So after coming to that realization that, it's just not working, it feels wrong. It feels wrong. But the good thing is, once you do say goodbye to that client, for whatever reason it is that you need to say goodbye, it feels so right afterwards. Just the weight is lifted off your shoulders, and you've then opened some space up for the right type of client to come in and for you to work with them instead.
So let's go through some of the reasons why you might need to fire a client. One of my big ones is when the client doesn't match your why. So you might have gone into business to have full flexibility of all of your time during the day, and you want to be able to be away from your desk and go to your appointments and manage your household or go to kids' things and not be tied to your desk. Now, if you have onboarded a client which now requires you to be sitting at your desk 9 till 5, that is going to be in conflict with your why. Now, that might be a great client. They might pay on time. They might be super lovely. You might enjoy doing the work. But if it has that clash with your why, that could be a decision for you to be like, actually, I need to change the services that I provide. So I'm going to fire this client so that I can bring on other clients that do suit my why.
Yeah, that's a really good example of having to fire a client, not necessarily because it's a toxic relationship. It just isn't a good fit anymore. Yeah. One of my big ones is, you've got to ask yourself, does this client value me? Is this client valuing my skills and experience and expertise? Are they valuing my time? Do they take my advice, or do they just ignore it and then go do their own thing and then come back and all of a sudden is questioning why you're going down this route? Are they constantly expecting you to do things after hours or very last minute? Or are they the type of client that books in a catch up with you and pulls out at the last minute? So that's an hour or a couple of hours of your time that you could have been spending with another client that does actually value you and your time.
Sometimes it's clients who might be asking for downscaling of time on a timesheet because they didn't think it should take that long. They're always questioning the invoices, the timesheet, questioning what you've been doing and how you've been doing it. Yeah, that could be another reason too.
Yeah, absolutely. Which leads into, is this client losing you money?
Mm. If you are not making decent money from the client, you've got to ask yourself, is it really worth it? And can I get a different client or provide a different service that does allow me to make a good amount of money? Because we're not charities. We're not in this to be a not-for-profit. We're in this so that you can have your lifestyle, your freedom, your control, the financial goals that you have. You're in this for all sorts of reasons, and you've got to make sure that that client is actually fitting in with those reasons, especially around the financial side of things.
Yeah, and if they're paying you a rate that isn't actually matching the value that you're providing, we wouldn't recommend that you immediately just fire them. You want to at least attempt to put your prices up somehow,
Mhm.
and then if at that point they come back and they're pushing back and they don't want to pay you what you're worth, that's when you then go down the "I'm sorry, we're going to have to part ways" route.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Another one might be that client, whenever they contact you, they just fill you with dread.
Yeah, yeah.
We've definitely had clients where team members, they upset my team members. The team member just absolutely dreads doing work for them. They can never do anything right for them. They start to lose their confidence and then they start making mistakes, and the relationship is just not okay at all. It's very toxic. They don't like when the phone rings or when they get an email from that client. That's a very clear sign that something's not right, and you need to consider whether you're going to fire that client or not.
Oh, yeah, if you're losing team members because of a client, boy, oh boy, it is time to say goodbye for sure.
Mm.
Um, is the client doing something that doesn't sit well with you morally, or are pushing the even legal boundaries?
Yeah, I think this comes into bookkeeping. Sometimes I see
Mm.
this, and we've heard this from bookkeepers where a client is asking them to code something, claim something, or just something that isn't actually legal or in line with the legislative compliance that's out there. That could be a reason to not work with that client, because you don't want to be in that situation where you get blamed for those things, even though a client has specifically asked you to do something. So if it's really rubbing your values and morals and in terms of legal things or financial things, that is a sure reason to really take a look at that relationship.
Yeah, that's a big one. You're getting into dangerous territory there, aren't
Mm,
you? If
you are.
something's going on that, whoa, just does not fit well with your own, morals, it's huge red flag. I've actually got a clause in my contract that talks about that. So
Mm,
that's a really good way for me to quickly be able to escape immediately from that type of relationship without having to give the normal 30 days notice. That's a big one to be able to go, no, it's terminating right now.
mm.
Mm.
Another one is a client who doesn't pay.
Hmm.
If they are always late or months behind, that is definitely a client that you need to have a very stern conversation with. Implement a direct debit or a payment plan or weekly payments or fortnightly payments, something. Try and rectify it. If that doesn't work, then that is definitely a client that you need to get rid of. That is absolutely not worth your time. You should be compensated for the work that you're doing as per an agreement that you've made with that client. And yeah, if you're working for free, then that's absolutely not okay.
Yeah, yeah. That's all from my list. Have you got any more on your list?
No, that's all. Yep.
Yeah. But it just goes to show, I think, in terms of those kind of main reasons for having to fire a client, I think it's important to remember that just because, putting aside the moral and the legal issues, all the rest of those things that we've just listed, um, it's important to remember that just because a virtual assistant, or sorry, a client isn't your right fit, or you're not the right fit virtual assistant for your client, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to find their own right fit virtual assistant elsewhere.
So yeah, we'll go into a little bit of the do's and don'ts and some of the examples that we have of when we have had to fire clients. So let's go into some examples, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I've got a couple that come to mind. The first one was my first time I had to fire a client, so it was tough. And not only that, it was someone that I had had a previous relationship with outside of work. So I think it added that added stress and angst as to whether or not I was doing the right thing.
Mm,
Um, and yeah, it was early on, so I was definitely going to miss that regular income coming in. But it was really important that I did it in a way where we could both walk away from this with a strong friendship
mm,
outside of what we'd been doing together. But that came down to it was money. It was money. She was one of my first clients. And I knew that I wasn't being paid what I was worth. But because she was my first client, I just went along with it, as a lot
mm,
of virtual assistants do, because they just want to start getting clients. And then when it came to putting up my prices, that's when she kind of started pushing back, and quickly came to the realization that in order to keep this friendship, it was time to cut ties. And I'm so glad I did. So glad I did, because within a week, somebody else approached me that was willing to pay the
mm.
prices that I was advertising at that time. So it worked out well.
It's making space for the ideal client to come along, isn't it, when you fire
Yeah,
the clients?
yeah.
So over 9 years, we have certainly had to fire a number of clients, that's for sure. One of the things that I say to my team members and remind them is that they are the most important people to me. My team are number one. Our
Mm,
clients are not number one. That is in contrary, or it's contradictory to what many people and um, professionals and advisors and things will say, but I 100% stand by my decision to put my team first, because if I look after my team, they look after my clients.
mm,
So I say to them, if there are ever any clients that you do not want to work with, that are making you upset, that you don't want to work with, that fill you with dread, please let me know, because I will either switch them to someone else, or if it's a real issue that I just think it's the client, it's not the relationship with the team member, then I'm more than happy to let that client go. And I make sure that the team members know that. I don't ever want them to feel like they don't want to come to work, or they don't want to work with a client. So
mm.
we have had 3 of those clients that I can recall. So
Wow.
one of them, my very senior, extremely capable team member, was starting to lose her confidence and was being berated in front of this client's other team members in a team meeting. And she was almost in tears, and she is not a person to cry at all.
Oh.
And she just never felt like she could do anything right or make the right decision, and she is super capable, and all of her other clients loved her. Now, I know that it's not my team member, it's the client. So I actually tried to have a conversation with them, and it went really, really badly. The client clearly had underlying issues that they felt that I had triggered,
Mm,
and I couldn't bring up anything at all as to what the client might like to think about changing or do differently. It was they felt like I was attacking them all the way through this conversation. And now I'm very good at having conversations with people, and in terms of work, looking at those personality styles and figuring out how to deal with people. I feel like I do a really great job of that. So when she reacted like that, I was like, oh, I don't actually think this is about me. This is about her and issues
Yeah.
that she's got. So we parted ways. It wasn't amicable at all. It was very nasty. But my team members, it was actually 2 team members who worked with her, they felt absolute relief. They were much happier. And I was like, yep, this is the right decision. I don't care about the money. It is not worth it. I will find other clients. Another one was a male client. Again, we just couldn't do anything right. And losing that confidence and actually making a team member cry, I was like, nah, this is not okay. Though he would get on the phone and he was arrogant. He was just awful and felt like he had a really big ego, and he just treated people badly. And I could see other team members of him leaving, and he wasn't able to keep team members around. And I was like, no, this is a toxic client. We're not going to deal with him anymore. So we also just let him go. Another one was a mixture of blaming us for everything, even though she communicated really badly, could never get hold of her, gave half instructions, expected us to just know what to do, never spent the time up front to invest in the relationship, was just always too busy. Would always be like, oh, I've had other team members who could just pick this up and do it. And just always blaming us for everything, and they didn't pay. I think she still owes us for 3 months of work, which we're going to have to do, go to a debt collector. So like that, you have to, 3 months is too long. You have to cut them off earlier. Yeah, those are 3 that really stand out. And with senior team members who really know what they were doing, they weren't with any new team members, and they had other happy clients, these team members. So yeah, that's just very telling.
Yeah, they're big ones. They're big ones. I feel like mine are boring compared to yours, Joe.
But you've got to do it early. You've got to, like, I often leave it too late. You see the red flags, you see the issues, immediately try and rectify them, but super quickly be like, nope, this is not working, and do it earlier rather than later.
Yeah, and I mean, ideally, you want to be picking up on these red flags before they even sign them up, don't you? So it's about not ignoring your gut and not ignoring those red flags in those initial consultations. And I think the longer you do it, the more confident that you are in knowing that, no, this person, it's not going to work at all. And so you just don't continue. You just don't sign them up. But even if you've been doing it for 10 years, there's going to be the odd situation where you are still going to have to fire that client. But you don't ignore those red flags, people, please.
The red flags right up front are when you can't get time with the client to do a handover, and they have to cancel and reschedule. You're never going to get good communication or time with that client.
No, I think I was like 2 consultations in. So I'd had the initial one, had a phone call, email, thought, yeah, this is going to go well. And then actually hopped on the real deal Zoom consultation. And it wasn't until meeting this client face to face, even if it was through a computer screen, that I realized that, oh my goodness, he did not let me get a word in edgewise. And I know it's about letting them talk, right? But when somebody asks you a question and then interrupts you trying to answer the question, for every single time, he had asked a question that would happen, I'm like, do you want to know? You're obviously not liking my answers, so this is not going to go well at all. So
Mm.
I'd invested a bit of time into him at that point, but it's never ever too late
Mm.
to cut those ties and to change your mind. Don't
Mhm.
ever feel pressured into doing something that doesn't feel right.
Yeah, even if you've got the handover booked and you just know that it's not gonna be right, that's not
Yeah.
too late. Even you have the handover, that's not too late. Just
No.
as
Yeah.
soon as you realize, yeah, you can go with
The,
your gut. It's always right.
yep, the earlier the better. Right, should we go through some do's and don'ts? Let's start off
Mm,
with, so when it comes to the actual firing of the client, you've made the decision, it's time to do it. We've got some do's and don'ts as to how to make this go smoothly.
yep.
Should we start off with the don'ts?
Yeah.
Don'ts. Wow. This one, you're all about staying above the line, Joe. So I'll let you go into explaining what staying above the line is. But basically, never blame or offend the client that you've been working with, even if they are the ones at fault.
Mhm. Stay above the line and the below the line, this model, this thing that we implement here in my business, so powerful. And we use it to help those who are in the members club when they come to us and have an issue. And we're going to do a whole podcast episode on this because it's really important. You've got to stay above the line. And there's this line which is or OAR, and above and below the line is BED. So or over bed. OR stands for ownership, accountability, responsibility. BED stands for blame, excuses, and denial. The more you can stay above the line in every interaction that you have with anyone, the better that this relationship is going to go or the conversation is going to go.
Mm-hmm.
So, as Sam says, no blaming, no saying this is you're this, you're that. Never, ever, ever offending someone by talking about them as a person and what they are. Only talk about behaviors that you have seen that that were issues or something like that. If you can avoid going into the detail of like this is the thing that was wrong and blaming them for things, the better this conversation is going to go. So this is sort of going into the other don'ts as well, but like you don't want to lie to them, but absolutely you should be stretching the truth.
Mm. Yeah.
So if their communication has been bad, you could say, look, I just don't think that this is working out. Communication is really important, and I just don't think that you're in the right space to communicate in the way that I need to do a really good job. So I just don't think this is going to work out. I'm giving you 30 days notice. I'm going to do these things, which will go into the do's. So see how you're like, you're not lying, you're stretching the truth a bit because it might be that actually they never communicated with you or they were just an awful person or the way that they communicated was horrible. There's no point going into any of that stuff. It's all about just giving them a reason, stretching the truth. I've enjoyed working with you, but it's time that we moved on and parted ways.
Yeah, so you don't want to lie and say, I've had the best time with you and I'm really, really sad to see you go. But you do want to say, I've enjoyed our time together. So you're stretching the truth. You're not lying, but you're stretching the truth.
And it's like breaking up with someone.
Yeah.
There's no point saying how awful they were and all these horrible things about who they are and what they do. You've got to part ways in a way that you give them a reason without offending them, but you also need to give them no opportunity to say, oh, but we can work this out. So you want to make it super clear that this is happening. There's no way around it. This is the reason why. And this is now how we're going to part ways.
Yeah, that's on our don't list. Don't get into drawn out discussions about your decision.
Mm-hmm.
You've made the decision, and you stand by it, and that's it. You do not want to then be spending the next week with back and forth emails or phone discussions, them trying to change your mind, You've made the decision, stick to it.
Yeah, stick to it. Have that wall up. You know, they say when you break up with someone, the best thing you can do is completely have that wall where it's like, there's no way that we're coming back from this. If you've decided this is how it's happening, and it's the easiest way for people to get it and be like, okay, I can't work with this person anymore. They have left no option for me other than to work out how we now part ways.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me. I had to part ways with a client, and it ended. I'd completely forgotten about this. It ended really, really badly. And like a bad breakup,
Mhm.
I went through and I unfollowed them on social media. I deleted their phone number from my phone, so I wasn't tempted to get into that kind of late night, drawn out discussions as to what went wrong in our working relationship. And it
Hang on, are
was
you talking about a real relationship or a client?
this is with a
Who
client.
who has
But
late night discussions with their clients, Sam?
well, that's the thing. That's why this one ended so badly, because that's
Like,
what was happening.
right.
Yeah, it was really, really bad. And it wasn't out of spite, me unfollowing them from social media. It was just purely I needed to completely remove, because this was very toxic. I had to completely remove her.
Mhm.
Every time I would see anything pop up on my feed, it would trigger me. I'm like, no, it's time to move on. So that wall, yeah, that's really important. You don't have to go to that extreme that I did, but it is important to have the wall up.
Yep.
And I think also a lot of these don'ts that we've just kind of covered, a lot of it's about ego as well. You've got to leave your ego at the door, don't you? You've got to completely take that out of the equation when it comes to communicating that you're breaking up with them.
We have talked down a number of virtual assistants who have wanted to react and tell the client how upset and frustrated they are, and it's just not worth it.
No.
Stay above the line, forget all of that, and just work out how you can part ways. There's
Yeah.
no point at all. It just really makes it even more toxic if you go below the line.
Yeah, and you also need to think, I think, about here in New Zealand, it's a small community. There's always somebody that knows something about you and what you've done, and we rely a lot on referrals. So
Mm.
it's not about being a doormat. I guess it's about getting that balance right. So you don't want to be a doormat. You don't want for people to treat you like shit and you accepting that and just letting them do that. So it's about putting a stop to any of that type of behavior, but doing it in such a way that you come out looking like the bigger person. You are the professional. You are the grown up in this.
Mm-hmm.
All
Oh,
right, let's do some do's.
yeah. So you definitely want to still finish the project, finish up the work that you have been working with that client, finalize we have handbooks, so finalize the handbook or the instructions, processes, whatever you document for the client and what you do for them. Finish all of that up. Don't leave things messy and untidy. And this goes back to the referral part, Sam. Like, you want to end on a really good note, having done everything, so that it leaves the client thinking, oh, wow, okay, they still looked after me. And so there's no bad blood.
Yeah, don't leave them in the lurch. If at the end of this, you can still come away with a really good testimonial, my God, that's a win.
Hmm.
That's a win. Yeah, you definitely want to be referring to your contract to see how much notice you need to give a client when it comes to terminating that relationship. Really, really important.
And actually state that when you do break up with that client, fire that client, make sure that you actually refer to, hey, I'm giving you the 1 month notice as per our contract, or the 2 weeks or whatever you've got in there, so that the client knows that, oh, right, so we've actually agreed to this and this is the process now. This VA is taking me through their process.
Yeah.
I think sometimes too, if the client is actually a good person, but not right for you, it is a really nice gesture to actually refer them to another virtual assistant.
Mm-hmm.
Give them another option, help them figure out how they can continue that support, but just with someone else. So not leaving them in the lurch.
Yeah, so I mean, you can offer to give them a handful of names that you think might be a good fit. If you're here in New Zealand, you can point them in the direction of the online directory so they can search for themselves. It's another kind of nice way to kind of finish that relationship. Another do is we'd absolutely recommend that you have this tough conversation with them, either on the phone, in person, on Zoom to start with. If you're wanting to kind of end well, that's ideal. You don't want to be having this via email to start with. There'll be some cases that you have no choice, but ideally you want to kind of have that more personal conversation. A lot of things you can read between the lines in emails. You can pick up tones that aren't intended to be there. A lot of confusion and hurt can happen just in the written word alone. But then after you've had that conversation, whether it's in phone, on Zoom, in person, then you want to confirm everything in writing via email.
Yeah, absolutely. Another one, I feel like it's better for the person receiving it if you can give them a clear reason. This is where you might need to stretch the truth a bit or be nice about it, even though they might be awful, but give them a clear reason so that they're like, oh, okay, I get it. I understand, and I'm going to work with them to move on. Otherwise, they're just like, oh, what happened? Why is it me? Why are they doing this? And there's just a whole lot of confusion. But if you just give them just one reason why it's happening, it's a lot easier for them to understand, to take on, to manage.
Yeah. I don't have any more do's. Those are all my do's.
That's it. I know that some of you are going to be sitting there thinking, oh, yeah, I have that client. And you might be filled with dread thinking about firing them. As we said right at the start, you will feel so much relief. And if you are worried about the finance side of things, we're like, oh, but if I get rid of this client, then I'm going to have less money coming in. Honestly, it opens up the doors for an even better client. You make space to have a great client come on board when you release someone. So, yeah. Good luck, everyone, and go for it. Go and fire that client. You know you need to do it, and now you've got the tools of how. Thanks to everyone for listening to this episode of the Sam and Joe VA Show. If you'd like to find out more, head to the Savvy School website to check out the amazing Members Club and find more free resources.
You can find us at savvyschool.co.nz.